Here we are in the shop today and we're getting this crate engine prepared and ready to go into Daphne's 66 Bel Air we call Ethel. Now this is our new blueprint crate engine. It's 400 cubic inches, 9.5 to 1 compression, makes over 510 horsepower, and it's a really nice piece. And so we want to treat it right. We've already put some accessories on it, we've got some other components going on it, but right now it's time to install the harmonic balancer. Now, these go by a lot of names. They could be called a damper, a balancer, no matter what you call it, they all do the same thing, which is to dampen vibrations within the engine. They work in conjunction with the flex plate or flywheel as well, and depending on your combination will be externally or internally balanced. Now, we got this one from Speedmaster. It's SFI approved, which we need for the drag strip, and it comes with a bolt-in counterweight, so if we needed it to be externally balanced, it would have it. But the reason we're doing this video today is to talk about a couple of other things. Mounting a balancer is one of those things that people either do wrong or are very scared to do. And so we're going to show you what not to do and what to do in order to install your balancer the correct way. Now, the first order of business is to know your tools. These are not the appropriate tool for installing a harmonic balancer. No matter what anybody says, no matter what old manual they say they're looking at, these are not appropriate. If the guys in the factory manuals at Ford and Chevrolet back in the 50s and 60s had the balancer install tools that we now have today, they wouldn't have used these either. Now you'll see a lot of things where people say put the balancer in the oven and get it hot, or freeze the end of the crankshaft with, you know, a CO2 fire extinguisher or a bag of ice. All those things will work and help you slide this sucker on there, but the truth of the matter is you need to throw these out and get the right tools. Now, that means you need a balancer installation tool. Now this thing consists of a giant threaded rod. It has two different threads, one on each end for different applications, for a big block versus a small block, Fords, etc. Now, the neat thing about this kit is it comes with a washer that slides on and rides against this giant nut, which is what you're going to turn in order to press the balancer onto the crankshaft. But the magic part is this big roller bearing. This piece also slides on the shaft, then rides up against the front of your balancer so that there's no galling as it pulls it in. Now, I know that some of you have used the threads in the crankshaft in order to pull a harmonic balancer on before, and good on ya, but the truth of the matter is you can really screw up the crankshaft doing that, and if you mess up the threads in here, all of this needs to come apart because the crank's going to need to go back to your machine shop where they're either going to have to repair the threads or drill them bigger to make them use a bigger bolt. And speaking of bolts, when it is time to bolt your balancer on, you need to use a high quality one. Balancers are available from $30 to $400 or $500 depending on your application and what you need to do, but spend the money. This ARP crankshaft bolt cost us $33.99, okay? We got it at our local speed shop. They are available with multiple head sizes for different sockets and for all different applications, and they also come with a really stout washer to hold that balancer on and make sure it stays secure. In addition to the tool, in addition to the bolt for your final installation, you're also going to need a lubricant. Now, some people use white lithium grease, a little engine oil to lube the seal, but we prefer to use anti-seize on the inside of the balancer. Now this stuff is nasty. It will get everywhere in the shop, but a little dab will do you and keep your balancer from becoming a permanent part of your crankshaft. Now that it's time to do the installation, there's a couple of things I like to do first. I like to take the installer tool and the balancer and slide the installer tool through it to see where it lands compared to the threads. The object of the game here is that you want to be able to hold it up there and either start the balancer on the crankshaft or hold it up while you start the threads of the tool, either one. Now, in our particular application, we know that this balancer, because we tried it ahead of time, will actually start to slide onto our crankshaft. So we know we can get this thing up here and that we can get it started and then install the tool. But first, we've got to add the anti-seize. And again, a little will do you just fine. So now that we've got a little bit of anti-seize on it, we're going to line up our keyway, making sure that our key is in the keyway and nice, and that the front of the crankshaft has no obvious burrs on it. Ours, of course, is in really good shape. Now this isn't as easy with the engine hanging up here, but still, now that I have the balancer up here and close, the other thing that I'm going to do is spread just a tiny bit of oil on the back side of this balancer. And that oil is going to lubricate the seal and make sure that we have no issues with it being dry on startup and then hurting the seal and having a front seal leak, which there's nothing worse than leaking oil when you start up a brand new engine. Now, our balancer is started and on. It is not all the way installed, however, so now we're going to take our balancer installation tool and thread it into the end of the crankshaft until it bottoms out. You want to make sure that you have your wrench to thread in the tool and a big crescent wrench to turn the giant nut to tighten this bad boy up. Now you'll notice that this big nut right here, this is what's going to actually pull the balancer on to the crankshaft. So you tighten it up against the bearing, and literally at first I'm sitting here cranking it by hand. And one of the nice things that it ensures that this thing is going on perfectly straight. Now again, you can see I'm doing this by hand. That means that it's going on there straight and everything is happy. If this thing's bound up and super tight, something is wrong. At this point, we've gotten to where it's no longer going to work hand tight, so we're going to tighten the nut with our crescent wrench. One of the questions that people often have as well is, how far do you tighten up the balancer? Well, the truth of the matter is that they are supposed to bottom against the gear for the timing chain. But the other rule of thumb to know where you're at, and ours just hit right there. That's how easy this is. You can feel it. It goes and it gets tight. That is all the way in. You can see that it's lined up right. It looks good with the pointer, although our pointer is for the wrong size balancer. Then simply back off the big nut and then get your wrench and remove your tool. Now, one of the other things that you can do to check, at least in this particular instance, because it's a small block Chevrolet, typically your balancer should be somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 inch from the end of the crankshaft. So we can see that ours is, and this sucker is installed and ready to go. All we need to do is install our ARP bolt.